All right. All right. Before I get up, I'm going to show you my little models. Review for those of you who've seen it, and new for those who haven't. This is your pelvic floor. And the triangle is at your tailbone area, pubic symphysis, sits bone, sits bone. And so between those 4 points, you have this diamond. In the very center of the diamond is your perineal body, which is like the central tendon of your, perineum. So we're trying to, it's not like we're not running around doing Kegels and stuff like that. We're just trying to sense the movement of the pelvic floor to bring some sense of energy that's we could start the movement from the core and then move out. And sometimes when we start the movement from without, we never get the sense of the pelvic floor. It's kind of like you guys that have done pranayama. At first, you feel your lung, your upper, chest, you feel your chest cavity move, you feel your belly, and then eventually you start to get the sense of your diaphragm moving. And so diaphragm always moves, the pelvic floor does move, but when you put a little bit more intention on it, it's a little more efficient. That's all. Okay, my other model is this fan. So this is a model that I made up from Eric Franklin's book, who shows the pelvic floor as a fan, like an accordion, or it can expand and contract. So you get this kind of sense that you've got this fan-like thing pulling your bones, especially your sits bones, together in the back. All right. So we're going to start with a little bit of our usual warm-up. So those of us here in New York had warm temperatures and rain yesterday, and we had the temperature really descend back to freezing. The ground is really hard out there, and wind. And to me, that kind of activity, that's a real March thing. It's that the winds of change kind of thing, that, going from warm to cold. And the wind, again, I'm always got a scarf covering up the wind points in my neck, where the wind can enter. So you're just considering that those changes are tricky on the connective tissue. Like yesterday, you might have felt a little looser, everything was warm for a couple of days, and then whammo, we're back to, February temperatures. So, and by the way, happy leap day. Only happens once every 4 years. Today's leap day. Get an extra day in February, and whatever that means to you. And circling the other way with just this kind of noticing. My hands slid into my pockets, but it's like I'm really aware of my hands are right over my hip flexors, and I'm aware of my hip flexors this morning more than the sides or the back. So any kind of tightness, if you had to sit a lot, or you were cold at night and you were drawn up into a ball, your hip flexors might have a little bit more stiffness to them. So again, you're just being aware of the way your body shows up with a sense of curiosity. All right, and then I'm gonna bring my knees together. And for me, this is my first back stretch. So I wanna make sure I have a little bit of lower core, first opening and stretching my low back, then feeling it in, the bend. So as long as I feel like I'm opening the back, energy moves back as energy moves forward into the knees, and then I don't get caught in my knees. And then I circle. So this is also, I'm really aware of how this moves over the top of my feet. It's a foot massage and ankle rotation. The knees are kept together. There's a little bit of lateral medial movement in the knees, but not a lot really. It's more the joints above and below that are helping that rotation, and then circle the other way. All right, so when you come back and we roll the shoulders. And then we're going to circle the other way. All right, so I'm gonna bring my crown up in my ear towards my shoulder as I lengthen that one side of my neck. So there's a little effort in lengthening, and then you want to let go of the effort. Just let this be a nice, easy roll forward as you go into movement. And then when you come out to the side, you sort of build up into that stretch, and then nice, easy roll. So you don't want to have this trying too hard when you want the vertebrae to move. You can move up into the stretch, and then nice, easy roll. And move up into the stretch and roll. And then start adding the opposite hand and roll. All right. So let's step out into horse stance and mobilize the hips first in just this stance. So I'm just going to be, straighten your knees at first, draw your navel in a little bit just to draw down your tail and feel the length of your spine. And as though somebody's got you at the top of the head, then feel the weight of your tailbone and then catch that weight by bending your knees slightly. So you're in a lengthened upper body, not putting all the weight of your body onto your knees, right? You're really catching it through the quad. And I'm going to do a side to side movement. And what happens when I do the side to side movement? Well, I'm doing it with my hands. First, I'm doing it with my hands. That's very outer. And then I can let my hips do it by themselves once I got the motion and I know the trajectory of the movement. And then I can just slow that down entirely. And the one half of the triangle, I can feel like one half of the pelvic floor triangle is working, and then the other half. So this is a side to side, the left half and the right half of that diamond. Not triangle, the diamond. It is a triangle when it's a half. But I'm thinking maybe there's a little bit of work on one half and then on the other half. And then the movement might get a lot smaller, but it feels a lot more internal. And if you're kind of not aware of the inside of your hip capsule, this might bring a little awareness to the inside of the hip capsule rather than we go to the outside. Okay, so that's side to side, one half of the diamond, the other half of the diamond. And then we're going to come back and do front to back. So I'm going to let my tailbone go back and my tailbone come under. And again, you're going to feel different things, whether you're naturally anteriorly tilted or posteriorly tilted, but I'm anteriorly tilted. So when I drop my tailbone down, I feel more of the work in the back of the diamond. When I come to drop my pubic bone down, I might feel a little bit, but I feel a lot less than I feel on the back end of the triangle. So you could just imagine that you're just allowing the front half and the back half to work. So at first I do it the way I know how to do it, which is, use my hip rotators, open my hip flexors, release my hip flexors, shorten my back, shorten the front, shorten the back. So that's going to be more external. And then I can go to back of the triangle. I might get less motion overall because I'm trying to sense what it feels like to move my pelvis more from the inside. Okay. And that can feel like a really comfortable if you're just allowing your pelvic floor to pull things together. Sits bones come together in the back and they go apart when you let your tailbone go out. And then last, we're going to go across the diagonal. So this is a repeat of the exercise. Okay, so letting yourself go across the diagonal. And I try to find it externally. I'm using my hands, right? And the hips feel a little passive because I'm using my hands to push. And that can be nice because if you got a lot of tension in your hips, then doing it passively can help you to find the least amount of energy to do it when you're doing it actively. So then I let my hands go and I know I'm shortening the backside of my back, and then I'm opening up the front, right? I'm going across the diagonal. I feel it through the muscles that govern my hips, QL, oblique. Okay, and then I can say, okay, the back quadrant, the rear quadrant, and the opposite front quadrant. Think about the pelvic floor. You're moving across the diagonal of your pelvic floor. So less motion from the outside so you can feel a little bit more of the inside. And then you can notice that it's there anyway. You're not, you're just increasing your awareness so that you don't just automatically go to the outside body for the answer. It's like trying to breathe, like, I'm going to think of my lungs. You need the diaphragm to help the motion and to have the motion really be efficient and smooth. Okay, so then I come back to the middle and I'm going to start from the outside. I'm just pushing myself across the diagonals. And if you guys, you have issues with hips, one hip's stiffer than the other one. These are great exercises because they're helping you to see that your pelvic floor may not be in balance. Okay, so I'm going to just use the outside body. My hands are passively pushing my hips so the hips are more passive. Then I continue that motion from the outer muscles. And then I bring the noticing down to that back quadrant of the diamond and the front opposite quadrant of that diamond. And say, oh, maybe I feel a little bit of work from the back and then a little bit of work from the front. And again, it's there anyway, but we often move from the outside first and then drag the pelvic floor in after. And especially when you're going from low posture to, like, you do low posture and then you stand on one leg, your whole outer body will relax if there's pelvic floor support. And your outer body will never relax if there isn't a sense of pelvic floor support. Okay, so again, I'm not sitting here doing a Kegel. I'm noticing different aspects of this whole area of my pelvic floor and how I could be working to have the hips move in space with less motion. I feel like I got less tightness going on in my hip rotators and all the muscles around here because it feels inner, and maybe the movement is smaller, but it's efficient. And then last, just go ahead and circle and notice that you might be going around, like if it was like a disc shape, that you would be going around the disc, just asking for the movement. Again, I know how to do this from my outside body. What if I quieted down that outside body and I just felt the movement go from my pelvic floor all the way around my pelvic floor, and then just let my hips go a little bit, let them be soft and follow the internal motion rather than pushing from the outside. And then I'm going to circle the other way. Again, I might understand this more from my hip rotators and my hip flexors and gluteus medius and the adductors and all that stuff. And then I could quiet the movement and say, well, what if it was just like more of the pelvic floor? Almost like you had a little like paintbrush drop down from the center of your pelvic floor and you're just drawing a circle on the floor. And it's much more quiet and much more internal. And it can be very relaxing to the hips rather than, pushing on them. When you get that sense of relaxation, your pelvis more easily drops into gravity. When I'm tense, I can never really drop the center of my pelvic floor into the earth because I got tension. So in order to feel that drop, things have to relax on the outside to get that dropped sense. From that really dropped and grounded sense, I can float up through my spine and lift my crown, not with this, push up, but an allowing up. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take to the chair for a moment. I think I'm okay. All right, so doing this in the chair, some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder. Because it takes out all the complexity of the rest of the movement, but your pelvis isn't hanging freely in space. So you don't get that easy drop feeling, but you're not as apt to go to your quads and your hamstrings, right? It's more isolated. All right, so I'm gonna just sit here and find my sits bones and see. I've already warmed up. I can pick up one sits bone, pick up the other sits bone, and then just sit back down and see if I can't regulate the way I feel on my sits bones before I start moving. Okay, so we're not going to do the whole thing that you guys are used to doing on Monday night, because we're just going to stick with this rolling. So I'm going to drop my pubic bone towards the chair. That's, home plate. And then I'm going to drop my tailbone down, and that's like second base, right? So I'm going front to back on the diamond. And I know how to do this with my outer muscles. I know how to lengthen my low back and use my lower core, right? So I'm going to go through the motion the way that I know how to create the motion, the way I usually do it, anterior, posterior, pelvic tilt. But then I'm going to just get a little quieter. I'm going to imagine that when I want to go to home plate, I just use the muscles near home plate. And then when I want to go to second base, I use the muscles near second base. So the movement is smaller, a lot less outer stuff going on, although you're always going to use your lower core. Your lower core is always going to turn on because your pelvic floor kind of asks it to. So home plate and second base. And I do less just because I want to sense what it feels like. It's also a nice way to finally figure out, where the center is as you're rocking through, where the most neutral pelvis, the place where it'll drop into space more readily. Okay, so maybe I'm going to try to do this a little different way. Of course, you can't sway your pelvis in this one, but if you're thinking of shifting your weight and lifting, but don't lift your sits bone off the chair, but go over to one side as though you're going to lift that side of your pelvis off the chair. And then go to the other side as though you're going to lift the sits bone off the chair, but just don't do it. So we're trying to get a left and right, home plate first and second, home plate third and second. Okay, side to side on the triangle. So I'm going to lean into one and just imagine that as soon as I imagine I'm going to pick this up, I feel my pelvic floor helping me to lift. Again, I'm not making it happen. It's just happening and I'm witnessing, so I bring more energy to it. And that's Tai Chi. It's like your natural movement plus your mind leading the Chi, creates the movement. So I'm just going to move to one side and imagine that I'm going to pick up the sits bone. And at first you might just feel your oblique trying to pick it up, but then you might sense that, oh, there is something going on across the pelvic floor. And it might be that the home side, you're feeling more grip. Right now I'm feeling more trying to lift from the pelvic floor on that side, which is a little different. Okay, and then we're just going to cross the diagonals, and I'm not going to get into the whole ligament thing, but it's like somebody's running from third to home plate and somebody's running from first to second. Those parts of the diagonal, I'm just walking across that because the muscles run in that direction. And I'm just letting my spine move across, and as though I was going to pick the sits bone up that I unweighted, and as though I was going to pick the rear sits bone up. So those of you who really want to get to know this, the better way, we do this on this kind of stuff on Monday night, so I'm expecting you guys to have these things around. Because your legs will want to move around and help. So if you put a block between your knees and you notice. So I'm putting my weight back onto the sits bone. I'm thinking that I want to lift this side, but I'm not lifting it. And I feel the back quadrant. I go to the front and I want to lift that rear sits bone, but I don't quite, get it off the chair. I might take some weight off of it. I can feel a little bit more of that front quadrant. And of course, it's not going to be distinct triangles like we have on the conceptual model, but the conceptual model gives you a map for regions of the pelvic floor and helps you to realize, oh, I am like totally weak across this diagonal or whatever it is, you know, that you move across one diagonal in your everyday heavy lifting and not across the other. And so it feels a little weak or disconnected. Your mind isn't connecting to the movement. So that's a good way to do it, is to block your knees from moving around. Move your spine back, and as though you're going to pick the other sits bone up, but don't actually pick it up. Because when you start to pick it up, you're going to feel these guys, the obliques and everything, going to get really loud, and you won't be able to feel the pelvic floor. That's body mind. It's your mind is trying to bear witness to what your body does innately so that it can continue to support the innate rather than this other crazy kind of pattern that we've developed. All right, so I lean back and I think about lifting that sits bone. You might even just get it like almost like you could start to think about sliding a piece of paper under there, just a little lighter on that side. And I feel that rear quadrant tensing up a little bit. And then I go forward and I'm going to lift the back. Again, if I lift the back, the QL is going to get tight. Then I won't notice the pelvic floor. So that's the idea of not going through the full movement, is of course the other parts of the body are going to help to do the movement. They're used to doing that. But if you take it part way and you just say, oh, I'm going to think about lifting that sits bone. Oh, there's a little tension across my pelvic in between the two sits bones. I lean back and lift, and I lean forward. Okay, and now you're going to just go all the way around. And almost like it's a disc that's going all the way around, and that where you're leaning into the back of the disc, almost like the front of the disc is coming up. Okay, not all the way up, because again, your muscles get too activated, but just think when you're going forward, you can almost feel your tailbone coming off. You almost feel your left sits bone when you're right, and your right sits bone when you're left. And if you kind of do that, you'll feel a little bit more activity on the pelvic floor before you start to get into the bigger muscles. And it's a sort of a massage. It's definitely a mindfulness, a sensing. And again, the pelvic floor connects the outer body. So if it's bridging left and right, front and back, the front of my body, the back of my body across diagonals, then, and the upper and lower, if it's the bridge to all of that, then if I'm not thinking about the bridge, my movement becomes left and right. It doesn't become what Alex is always talking about, this roundness. It's moving through the arc of roundness. If I'm missing the piece in the middle, the keystone, it becomes a right movement and then a left movement instead of this rounded movement, instead of below connecting to above, instead of trying to push your upper body by itself or push your lower body by itself. Without this main connector, the keystone that connects all the parts of the body, I'm going to be fragmented in my mind and my body. Okay, so if I go into, let's just play with this a little bit now. How does it show up in Tai Chi? We just kind of did this very light warm up. We're going to make this really obvious. You're in a little horse stance. And you're going to go scoop. But your hands are going to emulate your pelvic floor, coming together and bringing the energy up to your lower dantian. And then let the energy come apart at the pelvic floor, and then bring it up to the lower dantian, and then bring it up to the solar plexus. And then you guys who know the bandhas, you probably are aware of closing the bandhas and all the way up the core channel. I bring it up to the heart, and then I let it go. So when I let it go and I fold here, and I'm about to sit on a chair, that the sits bones come apart and the pelvic floor stretches. And then I'm going to scoop it up. I'm going to bring the energy up to my throat. And then I'm going to let the energy sink back down. And then I'm going to bring the energy up to my third eye. So this is happening all the time in Tai Chi. When I come onto a vertical and I want to find crown over tail over foot, I'm bringing the energy up to my crown. So I'm going up to my crown point and I'm letting my energy sink back down and connect to the floor. And up and flow back down. Okay, so you feel the heaven to earth connection of the bridge, the bandha, the root chakra, right? So let's say that let's go onto one foot because that's another vertical movement. So I'm going to step in a little bit closer and I'm just going to hold the ball to turn the foot out. So there you feel a little bit of stretch, but you shift across, you feel that stretch. And now actually forget the ball. Go over to one side and just scoop. Pelvic floor, lower dantian, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and crown. Crown over tail over foot. Step back, open up the pelvic floor and connect to the earth. Okay, I'm going to turn my foot. That's going to be pretty wide base. And then I'm going to start to narrow in. Pelvic floor comes together. Dantian. Pelvic floor and dantian, they're really close. First and second chakra, they're really close. And one fills up right away with the other. And then you come up solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, crown. And you could do this as a practice because it would help your hands are going to help you understand. You step back and you stretch it out. And then you turn, also give you really good coordination because you have to move your arms and you're used to holding them still. Okay, so I come in and I want to bring the leg in, bring the pelvic floor in and up to the dantian, solar plexus and heart and throat, and see how I'm using the energy of the internal energy to lift my knee, my throat, my third eye, my crown. And then you see the hands starting to descend as I step. And then let everything just spread out. Turn. You want to bring your legs in. Your hands are being your pelvic floor. Bring it in. The energy up through the chakras. Up to the crown. You let your gaze now look out a little bit. And then you step back and let the hands sink down and open out. Okay, so just a little practice for you to bring energy, because if you just sit here and you tuck your pelvis and you grip with your pelvic floor, that's not the right energy. You'll see that your whole back gets stiff. It's this flowing usage. Flow in, flow out. It's kind of like the ocean, flowing in, flowing out. It's got to be constantly moving, not gripping. Okay, so it gives us a little bit more of the sense of the movement. So we'll do that one more time. We turn out, it's wide, and we come in. So we want to bring this leg in, to bring it in. Lower dantian, up solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, crown. You can lift your gaze and your hands and look out, and then you step down, and already your hands are starting to move into a descent without having to do much. You turn and ground. Turn, gather. So I want to bring this leg in. I'm going to go from this wide position to in, to up, through the chakras. And if you're comfortable bringing your hands up, let them come up, let your gaze come up. And then as you bend down your hip and you step, your hands are already dropping. You turn and you ground. Okay, so that's a lot because it's not just the base coming in, but you feel a little bit of the left-right pelvic floor. So if you want to just study, well, what's my left and right pelvic? What do the left and right diamond do? You could just shift across and think about picking up that foot, but don't pick it up and just, or you could just slightly pick it up and see, oh, maybe there's a little bit more holding on the one side. Shift across and a little bit more holding on the other side, right? You think about cloud hands, right? It's a side to side motion. So there's going to be a little bit more, you know, activity on one side and the other. So it's always changing. The whole thing, you can't nail it down when you're doing Tai Chi because it's always moving around, or maybe a little bit more left and right, maybe a little bit more front and back, pressing heaven and earth. So I go cross. When I'm sitting like this, sit bones are just slightly apart. When I open, the energy's going up, sit bones are coming together, right? It's a little bit more in the back of the pelvic floor. So when I brush knee, it's more the front, middle, back. So that it's moving across. It's not fixed, right? It's moving across. So we're trying to get in touch with the flow and the constant movement at the pelvic floor so it can help left connect. There is no left and right, up and down, forward and back. When a center is like an amoeba, you know, moving through water, everything's connected. And so play with that for a while. Okay. I hope that was body mind enough, because just the fact that you're trying to focus on something as subtle as you know, your breath. That's why meditation chooses the breath. It's always there. It's always there. And you can go away and you can come back and it was always there. Your pelvic floor it's another diaphragm. It's always there. But if you want to steady your mind, body, and spirit and bring them into one place, you can focus on your breath. If you want to steady your balance in your whole movement, you can bring your awareness to your pelvic floor as you move. Okay, just another one of those. Thanks. Okay. So let's go ahead and do first and third. We're working on repulse monkeys and then how repulse monkey turns into slant flying. Okay. So where you go. So I think I find my vertical, and as I relax my energy into the floor, I could think a little pelvic floor to lift, not hard, just feeling a little support, a little gather, sending it up and turn and relax it back down. So it's like a membrane, you know, it's just becoming a little bit more taut and a little more relaxed. So here I'm expanding out, but then when I go left, right, I might feel a little more firmness on the left side as I allow myself to turn right. And then from its center up through the chakras to find crown over, tail over, foot. And then push down, lift up, might feel that stretch of that diaphragm. And then turn, now I feel a little bit more the diagonal, and then from the center up. So the center up right now is probably going to be the easiest one for you to feel, given the Qigong we just did, and because that there's more effort in standing on one leg. So you'll start to notice it. Pull back and press. Your feet are both on the same ground, the ground. It's a more subtle change. But since you're across the diagonal with your legs, you have to think about that diagonal. And then up from its center up through your chakras. Split, relax. You get to open your sits bones. And that, when you do the drive forward, it's the back triangle that helps to push the energy forward. And turn. You come from the center. This is a little bit of, you know, centering up through the crown, and then relaxing down, the energy can drop down and the pelvic floor is going to relax a little bit. And then from side to side, might feel a little bit more energy on this side that you're gathering on. And then from the center up to your crown. And step, a little stretch, and then together, small pivot, close hands, and drop. Circle up. So here it's gather up, all the way up. So you can stand on one leg and then a little release, stretch out. Gather up. And open. And relax. It's crazy because pelvic floor dysfunction can cause hip and knee problems and back problems. So what could happen if we start to really pay attention to it and get our body mind connected to all parts of it? It could really smooth out a lot of problems and movement issues. Which is, of course, why they write books about it. And here, anytime I gather, feel the back of it. It can take a while to get you to feel the difference between what your pelvic floor is and what your butt cheeks are. You know, because we're used to the big and we're not used to the small. Unless there's been a problem, then we are used to it. Okay, turn, sorry. Push, out, back, and a little bit of back of the pelvic floor, letting you open up your kidney. Gather the energy. There's so much energy being given to the front here, and I have to support it with the back. Oh, sorry, yeah. Fresh knee. Middle. When I start to make this change, it's going to be a little bit more to the front, right? Because I opened the back a little bit, and then through the middle, up, and more the back of my pelvic floor as I turn and change, lock, middle, front. Because anytime I look like I'm sitting down, it's going to be sits bones a little bit more apart, and then draw together. So that butterfly, those of you who go for the core class and the model of the pelvis, that butterfly movement, it's constant. Every move, open and close, ilia and sits bones. Or you could say the ilia and the ischia turning at the sacrum. Step forward. Number 3, open my back, turn, push down, lift up, and step. Block, turn, gather, and strike. If you can't feel it, just think smooth motion at my pelvic floor, constantly like it's your diaphragm, just breathing in and out to support all the movements of your appendages. Diagonal single whip, up through the chakras, sink back down into the floor, stretch out, up through the chakras, open, down, push, turn, and it's going to be up through the chakras. You step out, down, stretch out and open, turn from your pelvic floor up to the chakras, turn, stretch down and open. Turn. You want to get on one foot up to the chakras, that qigong we just did. down, and open. Okay, so that helps out with every part of your body, up through the chakras and down, up through the chakras. So then you become more willing to wait till the energy arrives naturally, rather than cutting off that energy and doing something from the upper body that's disconnected from the lower body. You got to wait till the energy comes up through the chakras. And again, middle, stretch down. And then a very clear up through the chakras. And down into the floor. And starting up, change my position a little bit and turn. Sorry, I went into cloud hands. Scoop. Hold the ball. Turn the body gently, the upper body. Step. You're stretched out. And you start to build up a little bit. Move up through the chakras. Let the energy come back down. It looks like I'm going to sit down. A little bit more stretched out. Turn. Pick up the knee and open. Up through the chakras. Down. Step, stretch out. Up through the chakras. And down. Follow step. So just like sap going up and down a tree. Right? There's this movement. Stretch and then up through the chakras. Look out and down. And go. Open. Back, front to up and down. It's very complicated. Moving in 3 dimensions. Up through the chakras. Energy goes up a lot more lightly if you consider moving through all those energy places. Open. Now you're going to feel that left to right. One half and the other. And it's crazy. If you get that energy to go up through your chakras, the arms get lighter. Because there's support from below instead of having your arms work by themselves. And step up. So I circle. So here, this is important, right? This is where this is pay dirt. This is pay dirt for pelvic floor. I go reach and I'm stretching. And there's a little bit of the front diagonal of my pelvic floor doing this push. I turn and I receive it on the back diagonal of my pelvic floor. And I relax, stretch it out again. I start using the back of that triangle, come to the front, pivot, pivot. This is what I mean by pay dirt. You're pretty stretched out, legs apart, but if you try to move from your arms and your legs, you're going to fall over. But if you say, I'm just going to pick up the center of my pelvic floor and let it go right up my chakras. That's where it shows up. Every time you're stretched out and you have to come to a vertical, the middle of your core channel is that perineal body. Okay, so we're going to go into the Repulse Monkey that we've been working on. Open, step back, turn, cross the diagonal, rear part of my pelvic floor to send out the energy to the front, and then the middle and up. Step, cross the diagonal, turn rear part of that pelvic floor, and continue center up. Step, cross the diagonal, one to the other, split, and then center up. Step, turn, open, close. Push down, lift up. Cross the diagonal and then center up. Come back. Use a little bit of the back to give energy to the front. Drop. So centered it up, but I'm on the back when I go to the front. Back quadrant or front quadrant. Middle and up. So across the diagonal, but there's a lot of up on this. Center up. The chakras, and then block. Back supporting the front. Up through the chakras, and then it's down into the floor. Push out through your fingertips and receive in your back. So here, back of the pelvic floor helps. And then I round the back. And there's a little give as I'm sitting. So there's a little pelvic floor stretch in the back. And so what's going to help me to bring this all back without it being an overly problematic for my body is the back of my pelvic floor gets stronger to lift me up and gather. And then step and open. And you're going to feel it across the diagonal more. Okay, so I did the best I could to keep that language of the pelvic floor going. And I know how hard it is because the movements are complicated. But if you just keep bringing your mind to it, like, oh, there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, oh, that. Where it really shows up, again, low posture to standing on one leg. If I don't have any pelvic floor in there, it's you're using the outside of your body to try to catch your balance all the time. And you never get this nice easy up, release down. Easy up and release down. That's actually how I get up on one leg. It's that membrane, that diaphragm gathering the energy and helping to lift internally so it's easier for my appendages to come up. All right, so let's just do from the Repulse Monkeys again, so you guys have a chance to feel that, and then into the needle at C bottom. Okay, so we're gonna go fist under elbow. So we've been working on opening the shoulder, the inside of the elbow, the palm up, because that's important to have my upper open if I want my lower to be open. And then there's going to be a little bit of that pelvic floor in the back to help you lift your knee in front. Then as you bend your knee and you bend your elbow, really you come a little bit more to the middle of your pelvic floor, and when you reach back, a little bit more the front. Step, you turn to the middle, and then back to the back. So just in that one movement, you went from one end of the pelvic floor to the other end of the pelvic floor, not to mention the left and the right and the diagonal fibers. But just studying the front to the back, I'm more in the middle. I go bend, and I feel when I do this lean and reach, the counterbalance is going to be more to the front. I step, turn, I go through the middle and then back to the back to do the front. So, when you feel the kidney open, you sit down, it's going to be a little bit more the back of the pelvic floor. And then you come up to the middle. And then when you step back, it's gonna be a little bit more the front balancing the back movement. And then I turn through the middle and I split and it's the back. Open. Suddenly your movement just sort of starts to happen more automatically because you have this internal support. And it just smooths out your movement because your mind isn't busy with left and right and all that kind of stuff once you got the movements and you understand them. All right, so then I come back and middle to back, step, just a little front, middle, open, a little front, anytime you sit down, step, middle, and back. So let's see what that does. This one's gonna have a little bit more front to middle to back. And that's only anterior, posterior, not the diagonals. Can't say it all, it's impossible. So here, there's a little sitting, a bit more front to middle. And I feel the back diagonal, the front diagonal. And moving across the back. Middle up through the chakras and brush. Front, middle, back. Reach. I have a little feel on the front because the leg is heavy. And I move again, middle to back. I'm sorry. And I'm gonna, I have to open my back and really open my back. But now I also have a sit going on. So you might feel a little stretch to the back. I turn and feel across the diagonal. And now I need a little bit of the back of my pelvic floor to bring all this up. Another pretty important place to think about that. Gather, really feel it on the back, middle, push. When I release this, it's going to be front to do the turn, to middle, to back again. See, I'm just saying, it's moving across like a wave across the whole diaphragm. All right, so let's do that again. Brush knee. My leg weighs a lot. So I feel a little bit of support on the front, counterbalancing to the back, and then I hook, middle. This is pretty much middle. And then when I sit back, the back. That leg weighs a lot. Then I have to open my back. And because I'm sitting a little bit, there's going to be a little stretch to the pelvic floor as I go down, which is good because it's like taking a breath, because then I have to bring it back in to lift my posture. So it's a little stretch, a little turn across the diagonal, and then back of my pelvic floor to lift my whole torso up. And gather a little bit more of the back as I pick up my front leg, and then step. You might move a little bit more to the middle, and then when I got to change, put the weight here and push the energy there. You can almost imagine somebody's got your hands and you're going to pull them. So you got to have that front of the pelvic floor to make the turn, right? Across the diagonal and to the back. It's gonna smooth out your motion. You're gonna feel like, oh, I've got this internal support. Instead of using my knees and my ankles and my shoulders and everything that I've been using, I have an internal support. It's allowing me to come up, forward and back and down and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so one more time, brush knee, push. Got a lot of weight back here. I feel a little bit more of the gather in the front. And then I come back, middle. So middle is a good place to be. You got to be strong right here because this is where the pull's happening. And then this is just the rest of it. Power is already, you're pulling from the front foot, feel it across the diagonal, and then back. Now, every time I got to pick up my leg, I'm going to feel it more in the back. And then I open my low back, and there's a little sense of sitting, so it's gonna be a tiny bit of stretching in the back, which helps me to gather energy again. I turn the back of the pelvic floor, helps to pick everything up. And then really gather right to the tailbone and step and open. Come to the middle again in the push. And then when you got to make the change, front of the pelvic floor, front and left side, to push my whole body into the next position. Turn. This is open hand at waist. And turn cross. Once you also understand a lot more about how your hip crease governs your movement, it's going to feel so good when you get here, because yes, my elbows might bend a little bit in the gathering mode, but it's really crease the back hip and the whole upper will turn. Instead of getting, this is often what I see, you turn here and either you move your knees or you move your shoulders, right? But you're not actually folding your hip and letting your spine rotate. Okay, that's the proper way to do that, is fold a little bit of sitting on the back and let the spine rotate. Or you're here and just, I already said this, you don't move anything and just move your arms, right? So that it's not, your hands are no longer centered, right? Understanding the fundamentals of your movement. So one more time and then we'll put. Okay, so in the push, out to the fingers, to the front, scoop middle. This is the powerful part of the move, is this from your foot to your hand push, and then release, back of the pelvic floor, you got to pick up this leg, and then open your S1, L5, and then you just kind of release. So that's going to open up the back, and then you can put energy to the back again to pick yourself up. See why I couldn't just keep it in one language. I can't feel this tightness and try to keep that tightness while I bend forward, because now it just stops the flow of the motion. And I'm already too tight. So I now have to use my leg because I already used up the pelvic floor. It's a breathing thing. So I come back, feel the back. I open up the low back, then I let it stretch out. And I turn left, and there's a little bit of the back of the pelvic floor getting energy to pick myself up all the way to my crown. And then a little bit bringing that breath into the tip of your tailbone and step out and release and stretch. Okay, so it's a lot, but any awareness of it without overdoing it, it's going to help your knees, your back, and your hips. Okay,